Hey, New City. This is Thurman Williams from New City West End, and I'm continuing the time of devotional from your pastors at all the different New City sites. And as every pastor and church has communicated, if there's any way that we can be of assistance or encouragement or help to you in this time, please don't hesitate to let us know. We would love to do that. That's what the church is here for in the midst of these times. I was reminded this week of an idea that comes actually in Jesus' birth in the Gospel of Matthew, when the angel comes and appears to Matthew and lets him know that all that's about to come about. He says, and the virgin shall be with child, quoting Isaiah 7. The virgin shall be with child and shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. And that's certainly true of Jesus. That's true of him through his birth and his whole life. But actually, there's a passage that reminds us that he's also God with us in the midst of death. And that's a passage I want to look at, and it comes at the end of this Holy Week that we celebrate this week. And it's actually a passage in Luke chapter 23. And I want to pick it up here in verse 39. And this is with Jesus on the cross being hung between two thieves. One of the criminals who hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." And you keep reading in the verses that come before, you see this criminal is just joining in the chorus of people deriding Jesus as he's hanging there on the cross. A few verses earlier, it talks about the rulers and the religious leaders mocking Jesus and saying, he said he's the Christ. In other words, how can you be hanging on a cross if you're the Messiah, the chosen one? And then likewise, you have the Roman soldiers who are irreligious people who are also mocking him as he's there on the cross, saying, if you're the Christ, save yourself. He said he could save others, but yet he can't even save himself. There was no place in their vocabulary for a conquered hero. There was no place in either of their ideas for redemptive suffering. And that was certainly true of this one criminal on the cross who's hanging there with Jesus. He's saying, in essence, Jesus, you want me to believe in you? Sure, I'll believe in you if you get me out of this. If you get me out of this trouble, if you get me down from here, then I'll believe with you. Then I'll believe in you. Well, if you keep reading in the story in Luke 23, verse 40, the other criminal has a different reaction, and something's changed within him, because Matthew's gospel tells us that both of these criminals were deriding Jesus. But this criminal has a change of heart. It says here in Luke chapter 23, verse 40, but the other rebuked him, the other criminal, saying, do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And then in verse 41, he comes to an amazing realization. He says, and we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man, Jesus, has done nothing wrong. And so even in the midst of his suffering and his dying there on the cross, that criminal comes to a realization both about who he is and about who Jesus is. He realizes that he is an unrighteous man who at the end of the day, with all that's happened, with all that's going on, he deserves to be in that place because he's ultimately guilty. And then he realizes about Jesus that he's not. He's righteous. He's not guilty. He doesn't deserve to be there. And so the reason that Jesus is on the cross is for a different reason than the reason the criminal is on the cross. Well, then it goes on in verse 42, he says, and he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Now, what reason does this man have to ask Jesus to remember him? This guy is a criminal. He's an insurrectionist. He's guilty of starting riots. He's a revolutionary. He's caused murder. He's caused an uprising. And yet at the end of his life, he asked Jesus to remember him. What good is this man going to do for Jesus, right? He's not going to be in the choir. He's not going to go on a missions trip. He's not going to become a pastor, go to seminary, any of those things. And yet he has the nerve to ask Jesus to remember him. What right does he have to do that? None. Well, likewise, What right do I have? What right do any of us have to ask Jesus to remember us? None. As that hymn says, there's nothing in my hand I bring, but it's simply to the cross I cling. Well, how does Jesus respond? In this last verse it says, and he said to him, truly I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise. There's that other idea of being with me. He's not only God with us at his birth, but he's God with us in death itself. He says, you will be with me. What an amazing gift. What an amazing picture of grace. What an amazing promise. And that isn't true just for that man who's dying on the cross. That's also true for you and I in the midst of all that we're going through, even in the midst of death, in the face of death. This promise that Jesus is with us and we will be with him. That's the essence of what it means to be a Christian. God didn't die for us just to get us off, to just give us fire insurance. But he died for us. Jesus died for us, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring us to God, that we might be with him and he will be with us. And you say, how can I know that Jesus is with us in the midst of all the things that are going on around us, in the midst of our disease and death, in the midst of the threat of unemployment, in the midst of all the things that I fear? How can I know for sure that Jesus is with us? But we can know that he's with us through all of those things because he's been with us in the worst of those things. He could make a promise to that thief on the cross that he'll be with him in paradise because Jesus was there with him on the cross. And that same thing is true with us and for us. We can be assured that he'll be with us through all these things that we go through because he's already been with us in the worst that we could ever go through. He's gone through sin and suffering and death, bearing the wrath of God for us. He was with us so that we might be with him, both now and for all eternity. I don't know how you are today or where you are. Maybe you're feeling alone. You're feeling like there's nobody that's with you. There's nobody that understands. There's nobody that knows the trouble you've seen. Well, there's one who does. There's one who knows. There's one who is with you and who will be with you and who promises that you will be with him, both for now and for all eternity. And so let that encourage us today. Let that move us out. Let it move to the people around us, knowing that we're not alone in the midst of all that we're going through, that he is with us and we are with him. Amen, people of God. God bless you today.